What's up, everybody? Welcome back to News Toast. And, I think people may be underestimating the Nintendo Switch 2 a little bit. I mean, I completely understand the controversy that comes along with its pricing. We've already talked about that a ton, and I completely agree. Their greed is palpable by this point. But we got a couple of updates today that I want to talk about. Not only in terms of its technical capability, but also for their launch strategy and their new price tag, as we got some information about that today. Now, we're also going to talk about Ubisoft and the tomfoolery that they're spewing right now. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with Hollow Knight Silksong. The mystery of its release date has once again been narrowed down to 2025, as it was cited in the Switch 2 Direct. I mean, let's just kind of hope that it doesn't get yet another silent delay like it has every other year. But this year does seem to be a little bit different. I mean, that's what we would like to tell ourselves. But in all seriousness here, a few weeks ago, there was some movement for Silksong on the Steam database. And interestingly enough, Steam just now added a coming soon label to it as well. So I'd say by all indication, they are seemingly preparing for a more official announcement, hopefully sometime soon. And I think we may actually have a slight idea as to where that could potentially be. And that's the Xbox Summer Showcase. I mean, okay, technically it could be revealed before then. I know there's been a lot of speculation that it could possibly be a Switch 2 launch title, which is, only a few days before the Xbox Summer Showcase. But I look at the Xbox Summer Showcase as a likely possibility for really two different reasons. One is because Silksong is a day one Xbox Game Pass title. I think some people kind of forget that at times. So Xbox is an important partner for them. And more so, and this is only my opinion, but for as exciting as Silksong is, if it were a launch day one title for the Switch 2, it could potentially get overshadowed by the much more popular Mario Kart World. I think most Nintendo fans are probably going to prioritize that over Silksong. So I think releasing shortly after the Switch 2 might be a better idea for them, considering Nintendo is still a very important platform for it. Now, speaking of Xbox, Hoyoverse just revealed Zenless Zone Zero will finally be available on Xbox come this June, which is just in time for its new massive 2.0 update. Now, if you're unaware of what this game is, it's an urban fantasy action RPG from the same studio behind the ever-popular Genshin Impact. And just like that game, ZZZ is getting a staggered release for Xbox. It released last year on PlayStation and mobile devices, but however, they're still putting a lot of work into the Xbox version to make it an attractive option. Not only will it have ray tracing, HDR support, native 4K resolution at 60 FPS, but it also comes included with some Game Pass Ultimate bonuses. This includes special in-game rewards and cloud gaming, which means that you can play ZZZ across multiple platforms even outside of just your Xbox console. So if you are on Xbox and if you've had your eye on ZZZ, well, then you can jump in again this June. Okay, so let's go talk about Nintendo, and there's really two different things that I want to talk about here. So let's first start off with their Switch 2 launch strategy and its new price tag. I think this is what most people want to know about right now because, we're all waiting for Nintendo to reveal their new pre-order plans and if they need to raise the price because of the current tariff situation. I mean, to say the least here, this has been a very unorthodox console reveal because Nintendo is launching a console in an uncertain market. Whatever the case may be, though, we are still waiting for Nintendo's official announcement. Now, I'm thinking they might reveal the information next week at the Mario Kart World Direct that is on April 17th. Now, that's just my guess. But in the meantime, some analysts over at Bloomberg chimed in, and they gave their deduction about what they believe could happen. One said if the tariffs stay at 10%, which is in effect for the next 90 days as negotiations continue, then Nintendo could probably keep the pricing at $450 and just take the hit on margin. At 46% Vietnam tariffs, I expected them to raise by $50 to $100. Now, this article continued on and said the company is preparing for what the industry expects to be the largest gaming console launch in industry. Poseidon Corporation, one of three main Switch 2 assemblers, shipped more devices in February to the United States for from Vietnam than in the previous 6 months combined, according to customs data provided by NBD. That suggests that Nintendo can build a stockpile of millions of consoles from the Southeast Asian country in time for the June launch. Now, this is actually in line with what I expect as well. I've mentioned this in some of my previous videos, but I think this is the logical way for Nintendo to press forward. Nintendo strategically chose $450 for a reason, and that's because that's the price that they believe gives them the best opportunity for success. And if you look around online, most people do seem to be fine with that $450 price tag. The game prices, that's where the sticker shock starts to come in. But regardless, a higher price for the console itself could potentially keep a large portion of gamers off of their platform. And the thing about the console business is that historically, it's not the hardware that makes the most money. In fact, for a lot of consoles, companies choose to sell them at a loss because consoles are more so an entry point for where the real money is actually made, the software. And that's not just for games, but also for subscriptions as well. So even though taking a loss on hardware is kind of against Nintendo's philosophy, that's not something that they typically like to do, this still isn't necessarily a new strategy for the console business when you look at Xbox and PlayStation and how they operate. So a small loss for the Switch 2 in the United States could actually be beneficial for Nintendo in the long run because the United States is a massive market to push a lot of software in. The United States is one region that console manufacturers, including Nintendo, just can't afford to struggle in. In the meantime, though, what they can do to minimize their risk is to stockpile as many Switch 2 units in the United States as they can. A lot of tech companies have been doing that for some time already, and it kind of sounds like Nintendo is following a similar strategy. For that matter, that actually could potentially be a good sign that the United States could maybe fight off Switch 2 scalpers because there will be a large supply for retailers. However, this is another sign that $450 is still very possible, even with that 10% tariff for the next 90 days. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about here, though, is the Switch 2 and its technical capability. I do think there's a portion of gamers out there that are maybe underestimating it a little bit, and I'm going to explain why. Digital Foundry, really on multiple occasions, have compared its graphics to the PlayStation 4, but they've also noted that in some situations, it may actually perform even better because of its new architecture and things like NVIDIA DLSS. And okay, some people hear that and they think, wow, that's great. But then there's also others that criticize it and say, oh, well, it's $450 for hardware that's compared to 10-year-old technology. Here's the difference, though. The Switch 2 is a handheld console. Handheld technology prices are a lot different. And truthfully, a better comparison here would be for the Steam Deck. And by all indication, the Switch 2 is more capable. We've already seen that with Cyberpunk 2077. And for that matter, there's actually situations like Street Fighter 6 where visually, it's even comparable to the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. I mean, it might not necessarily be 60 FPS for every single game, but neither is the Xbox Series S. So when you have a handheld console that's comparative to something like the Xbox Series S, that's pretty impressive, and that's what we're seeing here in some of these early games. So that's just a little perspective on the Switch 2 and what it's capable of. Now, one last thing before we go, though, and I think this is just ridiculous. Ubisoft last year told gamers that they should get comfortable with not owning their games, which really was just kind of a foresight to what's happening right now with The Crew. Last year, they shut down its servers, which essentially kind of makes this game useless even if you purchased it. So they're now facing a lawsuit over this situation, and, well, their argument for this is check this out. They insist that game purchases doesn't give quote-unquote unfettered ownership to it. In their words, they made it clear that gamers are buying merely a license to play it. And okay, if that's the way they want to be, then so be it. But then, maybe they shouldn't be so upset when their company tanks. Maybe they, in their words, should get comfortable with the idea that gamers simply don't trust them nor their quality control, which is all the more evident in their plummeting stock prices. If you're an untrustworthy company, well then, gamers will simply treat you that way. See, the thing is that respect goes both ways, which is something that a lot of modern developers seems to have forgotten, which apparently Ubisoft is a part of that group. Nonetheless, though, even though Ubisoft is in the headlines here, the reality is that this is an ongoing issue across the game industry. There's a reason that a large portion of gamers don't trust digital games. The idea that your digital games can be taken away from you without notice is an ongoing concern. Now, maybe some companies will act in good faith, but then you have companies like this. And you never really know what's going to happen. If Ubisoft were to disappear in the future, which could actually very well happen in this case, well, what's to say that they won't remove their servers that allows you to download your digital games? I mean, how much do we really trust these companies to do the right thing? If you have a physical copy, however, then you don't really have to ask those same questions, which is also the reason that Switch 2 keycards have been just so controversial this past week. Until companies commit to true preservation, even when it comes to digital, this will be an ongoing concern, and that's only highlighted just that much more in a case like this with Ubisoft. Let me know how you feel about this situation. What do you think about Ubisoft's statement, and how do you feel about digital games? Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.